Hello, my name is Fadi and I'll be talking about Parkinson's disease, or PD. Parkinson's disease is one of the most common neurodegenerative disorders affecting 60,000 Americans every year. PD is a part of a group of disorders called movement disorders. Movement disorders are a group of disorders that affect the nervous system's motor programming and coordination. Ataxia, dystonia, and tremor are examples of these types of movement disorders. Let's think about movement. Reflexive movements are rapid, involuntary, stereotyped movements like cuffing. Voluntary movements are deliberate and planned, like moving your hand to pick up something. Almost all reflexes are mediated at the brainstem and spinal levels. Voluntary actions or movements are planned in the premotor areas of the frontal lobe. Neural control of voluntary movements involve two semi-independent neurological systems in the frontal lobes, passing through intermediate structures that organizes movement before going to the spinal cord. These intermediate structures are highly important for this presentation. These structures are called the pyramidal and extrapyramidal systems. The pyramidal system controls movement from cortex to spinal cord via the internal capsule and the medulla. The extrapyramidal system mediates movement through a more complex circuitry in the basal ganglia, cerebellum, and brainstem centers. These intermediate brain centers play crucial and highly complex roles in organizing human movement. Movement disorders happen when these systems are disrupted. The basal ganglia, a part of the extrapyramidal system, are responsible for programming and initiating internally generated movements and complex motor planning. They are a collection of subcortical nuclei, a collection of masses of gray matter, cell groups situated within each hemisphere. They are organized anatomically and neurochemically so they can select and maintain motor behavior by suppressing conflicting activities while reinforcing ongoing behaviors. The basal ganglia include the striatum, the globus pallidus, the amygdala, substantia nigra, we'll talk about it soon, and the nucleus accumbens. Substantia nigra is believed to be the lesion site in Parkinson's disease, or PD. PD results from the deterioration of neurons in the substantia nigra responsible for dopamine production. Dopamine is a chemical neurotransmitter responsible for transmitting signals between the substantia nigra and the striatum in the basal ganglia to help produce smooth, purposeful movement. Lack of dopamine results in abnormal nerve firing patterns within the brain that causes impaired movement. Dopamine, as we now know, is an inhibitor of nerve impulses and is involved in suppressing unintended movements. Motor disturbances or uncontrolled excessive muscle contractures happens due to a shortage of dopamine. When the neurons that produces dopamine are compromised, dopamine levels drop and the normal signaling system is disrupted, causing Parkinson's disease. Parkinsonism is a general term for a clinical syndrome associated with tremor, bradykinesia, rigidity, and postural instability. PD is a progressive neurodegenerative disorders with symptoms ranging from movement difficulties to dementia, autonomic dysfunction, depression, and visual hallucinations. PD usually begins between the ages of 50 to 60 and progresses slowly over 10 to 20 years. almost 1 million Americans now living with Parkinson's disease. Prevalence and incidence rates are comparable in North America and Europe, but globally they are less comparable, probably due to research and publications ranging between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. While the most common form of PD, IPD, or the idiopathic Parkinson's disease, has unknown causes, brain tumors, head traumas, toxin exposures, syphilis, viral infections, and vascular diseases are common causes for Parkinsonism. Several genes have been linked to Parkinson's disease, such as alpha-synuclein. Let's talk about the signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms mostly are in early motor symptoms begins with weakness, incoordination, and difficulty. Tremor in PD is a rest tremor. Therefore, it happens while the patient is resting and subdues while the limb is intentionally moving. Hypokinesia, bradykinesia, and akinesia are all terms used to describe the slow, laborious, and decreased to restrictive body movements suffered by patients with PD. Rigidity involves the increase in muscle tone that can gradually progress to reach facial muscles, creating that masked face impression. Postural disturbances are the main cause for walking and immobilization difficulties with patients with PD. Patients with PD have a range of neuropsychiatric symptoms. Depression is encountered in almost 30% of patients with PD. Dementia, which ranges from mild to moderate in patients with PD, so we won't be expecting marked or severe impairments such as the dementia we find in Alzheimer's. They affect almost 40% of patients with PD. And they are mostly subcortical type of dementia, characterized by bradyphernia, psychomotor difficulties, and memory deficits. Perceptually, speech among patients with PD is typified as monopitched, monoloud, imprecise, and disfluent. Low vocal tone, low intensity voice that lacks prosody and incoordination of speech and perspiration are major characteristics that affect speech and voice of patients with Parkinson's disease. Swallowing or dysphagia can occur at any stage in PD and can also range from mild to severe depending on the stage, severity of motor disruptions, and type of therapy a patient receives. Patient may find it very difficult to swallow certain foods and consistencies, and their protection mechanisms such as coughing and throat clearing may be weak and discoordinated. These are mainly the signs and symptoms for patients suffering from PD. I thank you for listening, and that's it regarding Parkinson's disease.